Good job. So I know that I don't actually need a microphone, but we're recording this for the sake of Karen and for YouTube, so I'm going to use this to make that recording sound good, so I apologize. But I'm Liz, and I own The Empty Corner, and we're really thankful to have you here. This is our first exhibition, and Karen, if you don't know her, is a ray of sunshine that has really come into our lives at a good time. We were really excited to open this space at the end of August, and we opened it thinking that this could be a place, kind of a gathering place for creatives in Arlington Heights, a place where cultural events can be happening, and also be in a gallery space, but kind of an unusual gallery space. It's not your typical white wall gallery space. So we really appreciate that Karen was kind of bought into that concept. I've known Karen for have we known each other for like 12 years?
Yeah, I think it's about that.
Around 12 years. Karen and I used to be a part of an artists guild in Long Grove, and some of our Long Grove Artists Guild friends are here, and we made work together and had some group shows up there, and since then I've kind of known Karen on and off through the years, and I just was so happy when we reached out to her and asked if she'd be interested in showing in the space, that she was enthusiastic and had a lot of work ready to show, and some brand new work that I think she finished, like in the last week probably. So I think it's really exciting that we get to hear from her tonight. I don't want to ramble on too much, but I just want to say hello and say thank you and introduce my dear friend, Karen Sako. So here you go.
Thank you. And if you know me, you know I definitely don't need a microphone. That's probably like my biggest trait, but I do it used to be my biggest fear actually, when I would go to an art show or anything and someone wanted me to speak in front of a group and I had to speak into a microphone, I'd get all like scared and want to run and hide. But I got over that, and so now I actually like talking in front of people. So it's great to have a captive audience. Thank you for coming to see my show. It's called Above and Below. And the meaning behind it is I have an obsession with the botanic gardens. I turned into a plant person over the pandemic. And before that, I really wasn't into plants. I really wasn't into looking at plants. And my sister and I, we got some memberships and we started going, and I realized I love the colors. I'm so inspired by everything there. I love the colors, I love the combinations of colors, and my favorite thing to sketch and my favorite place to go is always to the lily pad pond. And so I took a lot of inspiration from that. So that's one of our first stops when we go there. And so this series came from observing the lily pads. And I also was studying during the pandemic Monet. And I know that I'll be crucified for saying this, but I used to not really like Monet as an artist. I was not that inspired. I'd walk through the Art Institute and go, oh, more haystacks. And I would just kind of go back to the great masters or the super contemporary modern art. And I didn't really stop to look at the Impressionists too much. So I took this class and I finally started to delve into what it was that he was really trying to convey with his abstraction. And I'm like, oh, it's all about the light and the shape. And I'm like, I totally get it now. So I was able to go to the Art Institute and look at his work again. And now I see it with a completely different eye. So what I wanted to do was paint one of my favorite things with the greatest metaphor, something that grows out of the mud and comes out to be this beautiful, bright, brilliant thing. And I just thought that's kind of what I went through as I kind of discovered nature and started like becoming a plant person. My studio has about 18 plants and my house has probably more than that. So I collect them and I love them. And so that became one of my hobbies. So how could I really do any justice to something that the greatest painter ever painted? So I'm not trying to compete with him. This is my take on the lily pad, which I love so much. I love deep contrast, but really I wanted to have some adventure with color, which was something I wasn't really that prolific at until this. So when I work on my abstract paintings, there's usually observation from life first. I almost always go and take photos and use those as references and do a sketch. From that sketch, I will go in and I will do a little color study, and I will try switching out the colors, inverting the colors, and then out of like maybe 3 different types of sketches, I will pick the one I like the best, and it will turn into a large painting. But that doesn't mean the painting turns into exactly what the sketch was, because a lot of times these take a life of their own. So they kind of direct themselves into existence as I'm painting. So I have the intent of what I want to accomplish with a painting, maybe the color scheme, but sometimes it veers. And sometimes the paintings get completely obliterated in the middle because I'm just not liking the way they're coming, so I'll completely destroy them and build them back up again, but there'll always be a remnant of what that beginning painting was. And that is what leads me to my technique and my process. So I use oil and cold wax. And so with the oil and cold wax, I'm able to build up lots of layers and lots of texture. I can get lots of transparency between the layers, and I'm able to scratch and gouge in and pull out those earlier layers of a painting. So it's kind of like a pentimento painting. There could be something underneath this that will still show through. And you wouldn't know it, but I know it, and I know the different phases. So I do have photos that I thought I should have brought for today that I can show you what the paintings looked like in the beginning, halfway through, and then at the end. And I think we might be able to do that later on tonight if anyone's interested about this painting in particular. So, you know, I've gone through a lot of paintings that didn't turn out, a lot of paintings that are sitting on the floor in my studio, but it just keeps me going, and I learn different things from them. Those 2 small paintings down over here were kind of just like studies of me playing with a composition and a color scheme for a larger painting. So some of the paintings on the other side you may kind of recognize from that initial study. I started out with art from my earliest memory. I was at home and I would draw on everything. I would draw on the woodwork, on the doors. And so even to this day at our new house, has my writing in the garage. Karen was here, you know, and I drew a spider on it. So I've always been fascinated with drawing and with blocks. I played with blocks, and I think that's what led me to graphic design, because I'm able to see shapes and placing shapes together. So I was painting. I started teaching at 15 at a Montessori school. So after high school, I would go across the street and teach drawing to 3 to 5-year-olds. It was 1 hour, and they paid me $10 cash. So I graduated from school early, and I got an internship doing graphic design, and they said, well, how much are you getting paid at your job? And I'm like, $10 an hour. And they were like, well, I don't think we can pay you that much, but how about 8? I'm like, yeah, I guess that'll work. But I'm like, excellent, because I think I had been working at Dominic's making $5 an hour, so $8 was fantastic to me. So, and it wasn't long after that that I realized I really needed to go back to school. I started out at Columbia College, and I dropped out of Columbia College really after my first semester there. The second semester, I only was taking 1 class. So I dropped out because I felt like I was faking all of my papers, and I was too lazy to walk to the Art Institute and actually look at the art I was supposed to be writing a paper about and just making it up and getting great grades. So I was like, I'm just going to go and be an artist, and I'm going to make art, and that's what I'm going to do. And then I realized very quickly that that's very difficult to do. So eventually I went back to school for graphic design. And while I was doing that, I worked at an engineering firm. I worked at an accounting firm. I was working at Main Street Art Center. I started teaching there, teaching kids classes. And every time my school schedule would change, the kids would switch the night of class they came to. So they kind of floated around with my schedule. So, you know, eventually I figured out I'm going to do package design, and then I hated that. And I really started to despise graphic design because there's always a deadline. Nothing was ever perfect. They always wanted me to redo everything. So working in the corporate world, in the corporate jungle, I felt like my soul is being sucked through the computer screen, you know. And I went on my first artist retreat with Frankie Johnson, who's here in the audience. I went to the Clearing and took an open studio class with her. And I came back that Monday and turned in my resignation at my job. And I was always fighting being a graphic designer or being an artist. And that was when I finally decided that I was going to be an artist. So eventually, I started working about 9 classes a week and teaching workshops with Frankie. And then the pandemic happened. And that turned my whole life upside down and really freaked me out for a while. So I wound up not working there and opening my own studio so I can hide out away from everybody. And I thought, with the pandemic, it's now or never. Like, what it taught me was you can't wait for an opportunity to happen. Sometimes you have to take risks and big changes. And as traumatizing as it was, I left that job that I had for like 23, 25 years almost. And now I'm just focusing on painting. So it's been the first time I've been able to just go in every day and just like focus and be able to create a series of work that's cohesive, because that's all I'm really focused on. And yes, I still do some side freelance work in graphic design, but I have a client, and that's about it. So the majority of my time is spent painting and sketching. I do a lot of sketching. I have a little sketching group that meets up once a week, and we've been doing that since before the pandemic, and we stuck together throughout the pandemic. And so that also taught me that I can't sit by myself alone in my studio and paint, because you need that connection with other artists. And so, you know, having this space, having friends in the art community, being able to go out and paint with people, even going to plein air competitions and being able to talk to other artists is something that we need. It's like vital to us. And this is a place that Arlington Heights needed. They needed a place where, you know, if you wanted to come and sketch, we can come here and sketch if we want to. You know, they have music here. They have all types of art. So another connection to this place I discovered recently was when I was doing a demo, and one of our friends said they would like to listen to some classical music, and I'm like, I don't care, we can listen to anything. And I realized how important music is to art, and especially to me. So he wanted to hear some classical music, so they put some on, and I don't even remember what we were listening to. I can't even tell you what was on. But they noticed that when I was mixing my paint and when I was painting to the beat of the music. And I thought that was really interesting because I never knew I did that. So that was kind of interesting, but we had a discussion the other day too that I realized how important music is. And I need to have music when I'm painting. And it does energize me, or it puts me in more of a somber mood. One of the paintings that's on the other side of this rack, I listened to Mendelssohn Symphony No. 3 over and over and over. And in each symphony, there's like 4 parts. So as I painted, I like closed my eyes first and I thought about where the music was taking me and what I saw. And I felt like I was on another planet, kind of landing in a different, you know, atmosphere. And so I was like, oh, you know, Jupiter's moon Titan is really yellow. And so like this would be really cool. And so this is kind of me kind of coming down into this cold, craggy, rocky environment. But it was listening to his music. So you'll be able to look at it and kind of see my interpretation. So a lot of these paintings are that, you know, they've changed, they've morphed, but there is energy infused into them and emotion. So I want you to look at them and feel something. I don't really care if it looks like a water lily, if it feels like a water lily. I want you to feel the space and the energy that I was experiencing when I created it. And that's kind of been my process for like the last 2 years, oil and cold wax. Typically, underneath all of these paintings, I do a charcoal drawing. So I use a big chunk of charcoal, and I come in, I start drawing, and I use Gamsol to kind of, which is like paint thinner, to thin and mush the charcoal around. Then I will come in and wipe parts of it out with a squeegee or with some different kind of tools. And I let that set up. And usually that's my favorite part of the painting, is that first initial jump at it. And then I come back in, I seal it with cold wax, and I let that dry, and then the charcoal won't rub off. So then I start painting on top of it. Otherwise, you're going to pull charcoal up into all your paint. You're going to get very muddy, grayed down colors. So then I start painting, and sometimes I feel like that's when I ruin it. So I do have one painting that everybody loves. It's not here today, but it's just charcoal with cold wax on it. I sold one of them, and the other one's still at my place, and I keep saying, should I put paint on it, or do I leave it? And so everybody is like half and half, so I'm like, why am I asking everybody till they tell me what I want to know? So I may start a new series after I experienced, you know, this this series with color of just working with that initial charcoal drawing. But the interesting thing, and the reason why I think it's validating, is I found out that underneath a lot of the old masters' paintings are charcoal drawings. And so they were able to do like that x-ray of it, and they can see particles of charcoal underneath. So when they were painting, like, let's say on a wall in a church, they would actually practice their drawing many times on like a piece of vellum. And then they would like poke little pinholes into it, put it up on the wall, and use charcoal to press in. They were like making a stencil of their drawing. So you always think they sat there and perfectly painted these things, but they actually transferred their drawing with charcoal. So I feel that that doesn't make this like a mixed media painting. It just means I'm using a very traditional way of starting my paintings out. So sometimes you'll see little remnants of the drawing peeking through, and I love that. I love leaving the drawing with the big shapes and the big masses of color. So hopefully, as you guys look around today, and if you have any questions about a specific piece, I can answer them better. But typically, I was painting on these big, heavy boards. They're very slick, and I seal them with ground for oil, which is a very, very slick type of a gesso to prepare the maple panels. But this thing weighs 60 pounds, and after you lift it a couple times in your studio and ship one to Ohio and spend, $350 for a truck to come pick it up, I decided to try a different type of material to work with. And so that is the material on these framed pieces over here, and I'm working on Belgium linen. And I love it and I hate it. So I'm not exactly sure if it's my thing, but I love that it's got this really heavy, deep, gritty texture that I can really scrub into, but I can't get a lot of the same effects I get on the boards. So I'll still probably use both, but definitely going big, going forward, I'm gonna use something that's a lot lighter and a lot easier to transport and pick up and move. So some of these are ampersand boards, and then I had some maple boards made for me. And the maple boards are amazing, and they're like art on their own, but they're just very pricey and very heavy. So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, your charcoal that you're drawing with, those big sticks, do you sometimes use the side of it and just get big tones with it as well?
Yes.
So you can be, with the gamsol, you can really push it around like paint and wipe it off and scrape it.
Yes.
So it's a nice tonal thing.
Yeah, and so it's actually like I'm doing a traditional wash, except I'm using charcoal. And why? I just like drawing onto it. There's something about using charcoal that I just love. I've always loved teaching charcoal drawings, and so yeah, I'll do that. I have a video up too where you can see the start of a painting, and that's the one that I've stopped working on because everybody's just like, I love it, don't work with it. So there's an energy that are in those that I think sometimes when I paint, I just lose.
Very expressive.
Yeah, and it's just, they're just cool. So maybe I'll start working with that and just put some glazing of colors in. So that's another thing I do on a lot of these is I glaze. I do a lot of glazing, which is, again, a very traditional technique. So this purple painting over here, I'll use this as an example. It was the most ugly painting I've ever made in my life. It was this bright pink. It was, I don't even know. It looked like some big flower, but it was like the most horrible composition, and it was so pink, and I thought, what was I doing? Like, what was I thinking? So I worked with it more, didn't really like it, and then I decided to glaze a color called asphaltum on top of it. And that's an old traditional color, which is kind of like a cooler brown. And then it kind of changed all that pink that I was working with into this really cool purple. So I was like, oh my God, I like it so much better, and I was able to continue with the painting. So sometimes those stumbling blocks, when you think, I'm giving this up, I can't believe it, is actually the best lesson you can ever learn. And if you don't risk it and try to just experiment with something, you're never gonna grow. So that's the biggest, thing I can tell you about all of these paintings that I've made is that I've learned something from every single one of them. And will continue to do so. But yes, charcoal is one of my favorite things, and I will even on top of a dried wax layer come back in and draw with charcoal again. Or pan pastels.
And then you seal with wax.
Seal it with wax, go right back on top again. So that's really fun to do that.
I think that's a cool thing to go back into old paintings that you don't like. And I think it is one of the places solutions.
Yeah, new solutions and magic happens. And you're like, wait, that is the coolest thing I've ever done. So now I glaze a lot more. So whenever I feel like all is lost, I know just stop, calm down for a minute, and just do a nice little glaze. And the next thing you know, everything is coming back together. It's a way of unifying, bringing harmony to a painting too. So that was, it's just great that I can show you the painting right now so you can see what came of that. And I was very shocked too, because that painting, some of them paint themselves and they go pretty easy, but that painting was definitely a struggle. And I had entered that into a National Oil and Acrylic Painting Society show, and it got in. And I couldn't believe it, because they're very realistic, very, very beautiful, fantastic, amazing paintings. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to try it. And so they loved that painting. So that was very validating for me, that that struggle that I went through and all the testing and adventuring I did paid off. Any other questions? Yes.
I feel like you probably know the answer to this, but so you get a lot of inspiration from the botanical gardens. A lot of these paintings are based on or from that. What is it that you find special about that setting, and do you find that also in other naturescapes that you visit or see?
Yes, I find inspiration in a lot of different places. One is right around the corner from my house. There's a lady who has the most beautiful garden. My sister and I were walking one day, and I don't know why. I've lived there since 1980, and so has this lady, and I've never looked at her flowers. I'd never looked at her plants, but she literally looks like a master gardener, and it looks like you're walking through the botanic gardens, and she has the most beautiful dahlias I've ever seen. And I looked at my sister, and I'm like, why have we never noticed? And it was like, I don't know what happened in me, but it's just like the nature bug just snapped. And I was doing a lot of plein air painting. I always loved walking in the woods, but there's just something now about the colors in nature that you could never ask for a better artist. And so I just get inspiration from everything. So I can even get inspiration from looking at a rusty old car, the way it's rusting. So I just look at everything with a curiosity. And then I think, oh, that could be a cool jumping off point for a really neat painting. But the botanic gardens, I don't know what it is. It's just, I like to go at 8 o'clock when the members only get to go. So there's hardly anybody there. And I leave by 10 when the general public comes in. So I'm still not around the masses of people, but it's just beautiful, quiet, and serene. And it's just, I don't know, like taking a nature bath. So I'm lucky that I'm close to it. Yes?
Do you ever get inspiration from the galaxy, cows, barns?
Yes, actually. So I do a lot of plein air painting, and I did a show this summer in Richmond, Illinois, and I actually painted inside a barn, looking out the door because the light was coming in from across the meadow, and just the way the light was flooding in the goat barn. And it was like the craziest thing for me to paint. Like, how am I going to paint goats and all these animals running around? And I'm distracted by all this action around me. And one of the goats escaped the pen. And I'm like, oh no, what am I supposed to do? What's going to happen? And I found the farmer. She's like, oh, whatever, it's okay. And then pretty soon I feel a nibbling on my pants. And then there goes one of my paintbrushes. And then she's trying to get at my garbage. And so, as inspiring as that was, it was just the coolest experience. So that's why I love plein air painting and painting outside, because I always have a crazy story to tell about it. Either my gear is flying away in the wind, I have a 6-foot debris field, or I meet the coolest, weirdest people when I'm painting outside. So a lot of that then gets translated to my bigger paintings, because the best way to learn how to really see things and to design is by, observing from nature and painting from life. So that is a very important part of my painting and my inspiration as well. Oh, and you said space, the galaxy. So yes, I'm a big fan of SpaceX, and I'm a sci-fi geek, and believe in all the paranormal and supernatural stuff. So earlier, it was like around, mid 2020, SpaceX was sending up the Crew Falcon to the International Space Station, and I was so excited. And actually, Allie, who's here in the audience, watched them dock to the International Space Station. We were screaming and cheering, and everybody came running saying, "What are you guys watching? Is there a game on?" We're like, "No, we just attached to the space station." Everybody thinks that I'm ridiculous, but some of my paintings are inspired by space. So different planets, different moons, different atmospheres. So a couple paintings here were actually inspired before I started the lily pads. I was like in this big space kick, and kind of the colors and the atmosphere of space. So those are two running themes, but the latest are the lily pads. So I invite you all. You can ask me some more questions if you have any questions, but come and view all my work and let me know what you think about it. Thank you for coming, and thanks to Liz and everybody here at the Empty Corner for being amazing and hosting me. And we'll be having a couple more cool art events here while my show is up. We'll be doing another critique on December 1st, and we're going to have an artist talk on next Saturday morning at 10. So if people missed the show tonight, you can come back next Saturday and hear me talk about the same stuff again. So if you want to, come on down and hang out with me. Yes?
Is that related to this one because it's more realistic? But
Yeah, kind of when I first started the series, they were a little bit more representational. And this one was started a long time ago, and it had a lot of time in between it. I was going through some upsetting things, and so I kept changing the painting, changing the colors. And then as I progressed with the water lilies, they became a little bit more loose, a little bit more abstract, a little bit more, how can I show it's a lily pad without making it look like it's a lily pad? So as I evolved through it, and I have the last one that I was trying to get done for today, which I just couldn't get it dry in time. I tried cooking it and making it dry faster, but that one is absolute abstraction and more just positive and negative. So hopefully if I can get that finished, I can bring that in here as well. But they just keep getting, they're evolving and becoming more and more abstract and more loose as I go. And so it's just about the color and just about the composition and not as representational. And what I like about this one is it is a little bit, but it also isn't. It's is this what's below the water that I'm viewing, or is it what's above the water? And is this the horizon line, or is the horizon line out of sight? So I want to leave questions for you guys to answer as you look at it. So I don't want to be so literal about it. It's something for you to kind of have a conversation about. Thank you guys. Hi, John.
How are you? I'm sorry, late.
You're getting demerits for being late to the show. That's just kidding. So if there's no more questions, we can get started. Well, I guess we are getting started.
We're just getting started.
Yes, so come on and take a look at everything. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you coming.
You broke it.